Now that the TTB has an official designation for what is an American single malt, I've been looking at whiskey shelves in a whole different light. I've been looking for things that don't say bourbon, that don't say rye. Been looking for things that say American single malt or even single malt. So I got a couple bottles that I want to take a look at with you guys. Roll that intro. Hey guys, welcome back to T-Rod Whiskey. I am your host, T-Rod. It's been kind of an exciting few weeks. American single malt is now a real thing, right? Has its own designation, has its own legal definition. That's awesome. But it's not something that just happened overnight, right? There's been a lot of people making American single malts for a long time. Specifically, there's this place in Texas that has been making Texas single malts. And I'm kind of excited about them, so I wanted to share them with you guys and you get into some tasting notes here. But it is coming out of Swift Distillery out of Driftwood, Texas. So Swift Distillery was started by Nick and Amanda Swift about 12, 13 years ago, I think. It's about 25 miles outside of Austin, Texas. So it's not truly in the middle of nowhere, but when I think of Texas, I feel like everything is like a million miles apart and like just down the road is 45-minute drive. But that's because I'm from Michigan, so that's how we do things. But these are both Texas single malts, so I'm assuming they would also fall into the category of American single malt. They are both made from 100% Scottish two-row malted barley that they source in from the UK. Both of these are a 44%, I want to say. Nope. So the first one is aged in bourbon barrels and French Sauternes casks. Sure, I butchered that, so please feel free to give me hell in the comments. But this one is 44%, and then the other one is finished in Kentucky bourbon barrels and Spanish Oloroso sherry casks. This one's 43%. Now, the Kentucky bourbon barrels that they are sourcing to age their juice in is coming from Heaven Hill, Old Forester, and Woodford. So some truly great Kentucky legacy distilleries they're grabbing the barrels from, and they are putting their distillate in. These things are really only, I want to say, 2 years old, between 12 and 18 months, and they spend another 6 to 12 months in finishing casks, which gives them a really unique flavor. One of the great things about Texas whiskey, and I know some of you guys just cringed a little bit because you're like, oh my God, it's like 2 to 2.5 years old. One of the really, really interesting things about these whiskeys is they're aged in Texas, obviously. Well, the Texas heat, it just interacts really, really quickly with the barrel wood. It just pushes and pulls that whiskey in and out of it at a much faster rate. So what you can get is a much more developed, more refined tasting whiskey in a shorter period of time. I don't want to say an older or mature whiskey because, as we all know, there's no substitute for time. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't get a great single malt whiskey in a relatively small amount of time. Now, they're observing very much the same process as what Scottish whiskey makers are using. You know, the two-row malted barley, the M1 yeast. So they're effectively making whiskey the same way the Scotch would, but they're doing it in Texas, where the climate is wildly different. Scotland is cold, it's damp, it's rainy for like half of the year. Texas is known for its heat and its dry climate and its sometimes bizarre winter freakouts. So a lot more of a weather swing in Texas. Whereas in Scotland, it's much further north on the hemisphere. So you got two very different environments, but whiskey being made the same ways. So what I would really love to do is take a dive into this, because if you're like me and you're a whiskey appreciator, you're not just a bourbon geek or a rye geek or a Scotch head or a peat head. If you truly appreciate all different kinds of whiskey, this is definitely something worth trying. I really like the Sauternes cask, so we're going to jump into that one first. Give that one a go. And by the way, thank you, Nick and Amanda, for sending these out. Both of these bottles were very generously donated to the channel. I very much appreciate you guys, because otherwise it'd be about a 16-hour drive for me to get to Austin to get a hotel, and then another, call it half an hour, to drive over to the distillery and grab a pair of these. So, see, this is one of the things that I like about Scotch, is this doesn't punch you in the face. This kind of caresses your nose a little bit. It's got more of a velvety, white, fruity character. It's honey and it's ripe green apple. There's some pear, there's a little bit of oak, but it's just much more mild, more cereal forward. You get a lot more of an impact from the barley than you would on bourbons or ryes, or in a lot of cases, some scotches, in my opinion, because of how young this is. It's still a little bit more aggressive, but in a good way. It's more upfront. It's not as subdued. And you just got that white fruit, honey, grains. Let's give it a taste. Mm-hmm. Very easy sipping. This is something that, you could probably pour yourself a rocks glass or a Glencairn in the Texas heat, and you're not going to mind it. The first thing that comes to mind is dried apples, like dried apple fruits, rolled in honey with just like a dusting of like a powdered vanilla, or I'm having a difficult time describing what that is. But then you've got that oak note that's present throughout, but it's not a powerful oak note. It's a very subtle oaky character. A little bit of a hay note, but that grain character is in there throughout the entire taste. And it actually, for being 44%, this coats your palate really well. It's got just a pinch, just a smidge of white pepper at the back. And I don't know if that's influence from the wood or exactly where that comes from, because I'm not super well versed with single malts, but this is delightful. You don't get a youthy, ethanol-y, nasty taste on this. One thing to keep in mind is this is a single malt. These are single malts. This is not going to taste like Texas bourbon. So if you're somebody who likes Still Austin or Garrison Brothers, you have to understand going in it, this is a completely different animal. This is, if Still Austin is an M1 Abrams, this is a Colt 1911. Just as finely crafted, just as impressive, but in different ways, more refined ways, more subtle ways. Okay. And it's good. It is. A little bit of a pear there, like a bitter pear. But it's just, I like it. I like it a lot. Next, this is the one that's finished in ex-Kentucky bourbon barrels and some Oloroso sherry casks. Now, me personally, when I drink a Highland or a Lowland or really any unpeated Scotch whiskey, I prefer a sherry cask finish, just because I don't want like a ton of red fruit, but I want that fruit subtlety kind of throughout the palate. I don't want to be sitting there, just tasting oak and sea air, right? So I'm sure we're not going to get that sea air on this one, as obviously they're quite a bit inland, but this one, just a beautiful straw color. Really, really nice. Not nearly as pale as I thought it would be. I've seen some truly pale 10-year-old scotches, and this is not that. This has the color of a single malt that is easily 4 to 5 times its age, if not more. Okay, so on the nose, this one has more of a stewed raisin kind of note, but there's still a hint of grain. A bit of earth, maybe raw wood, not toasted, but raw wood. I don't know if it's a brown butter or just a regular butter. There's a slight, like a dairy note. Like maybe it's I don't know, it's a heavy cream. I can't pick it out exactly on the nose. Let's go in for a taste, because I am dying here. Okay, so subtle, dark red fruit, like I don't know if it's raisin or what that is. I want to say it's a raisiny note is there, and it kind of dances throughout. It doesn't hit the middle of your palate, but it kind of tickles the edges a little bit. Again, more of a hay characteristic, very cereal grain forward. This tastes like it almost has a bready note to it. It's definitely a yellow butter, and it's got a slightly creamy mouthfeel to it. It's very nice. It coats the palate well, and you're still kind of getting that buttery butterscotch, like a very thin butterscotch, but there's like a little bit of a sweetness at the back, but it's not like a syrupy sweetness or anything like that. Maybe like a wood sugar kind of note. It's amazing how different the finishing casks are. This one was a lot of white fruits. This one's more dark fruits. I think that's the difference between the Sauternes and the Oloroso. That little bit of butterscotch might come from the bourbon barrel cask, giving some of its influence. This one's 1% lighter, so 43%, 2 proof points, whatever you want to call it, but also very good. A nice, enjoyable, approachable sipper. If I was trying to get somebody that wasn't really liking bourbon into some sort of an American whiskey, both of these are things that I would pull out. They're not going to be overly sweet, but they're not going to punch you in the face either. But there's enough complexity here. I swear I'm getting like a slight orange rind, like just like a raw orange rind. Like if you were to just touch the tip of your tongue to it, you get like that slight little bit of like it's not tannic, but like some kind of like a bitter citrus note. There's a little bit of that in here, and it's not off-putting. It's actually very complimentary. Yeah, amazing. I really like both of these. This makes me want to try more American single malts, and actually, specifically, it makes me want to try more Texas single malts because I like how the Texas climate ages whiskeys. Every Texas whiskey or bourbon I have actually enjoyed. And this is just another leg or another branch on the whiskey tree, if you would. It's not better or worse than a bourbon or a rye. It is a completely different animal. So it would be really disingenuous to try and compare it to anything else. I've had one other American single malt that was finished in Oloroso sherry casks, but it's not the same as this. There's a different age statement. There's a different proof point. There's no way to compare it. This is a very, very, in my mind, the palate is very refined and very nuanced. This would hold its own, I think, with a lot of 12, maybe even 14-year-old Highland scotches. Doesn't have that C characteristic that a lot of those will run into, but this does have that really delicious grain forward note that you look for when you're a Scotch drinker. It has some of the fruitier characteristics that have been handed down from the finishing casks, and it has enough depth to it that I could fill this glass with an ounce, and if I really wanted to, sit here and probably pick out tasting notes for the next hour and a half. This has that kind of depth to it. So if you guys are in Texas and you haven't been to Swift Distillery, shame on you. If you're not in Texas and you're planning on going, I would highly recommend stopping by, seeing Nick and Amanda, grabbing a couple of bottles. These are really good. I can't say enough good things about these bottles. These whiskeys are really, really lovely. I like them a lot. But that's what I've got, guys. American single malts are becoming very, very exciting. They're becoming the new kid on the block very, very quickly. A lot more distilleries are getting into it, especially the legacy players. Jack Daniels has their American single malt. You've seen Jim Beam come out with the Claremont Steep single malt. I'm certain Buffalo Trace is going to come out with something sooner than later. I don't know if Heaven Hill has an American single malt, an ASM. I don't know if they have one of those yet, but I'm sure it's on the way. One of my personal favorite distilleries, American Fifth in Lansing, has been doing American single malt whiskeys for years now and been refining it. So there are people out there doing this. There are people out there crafting these delicious, amazing whiskeys. If you guys just give them a shot, you might actually be surprised at what you do and don't like. So give it a go. If you've made it this far, as always, please drop a like and a comment down below. Make sure you smash that subscribe button, guys. We got to praise the algorithm overlords and make an appeasement to them. So please hit that subscribe button. We got a lot more cool stuff coming your way. A lot more bottle reviews. I got another one in the mail today. Got some cool stuff planned for a couple holidays that are coming up that I think you might enjoy. But otherwise, I'll see you next time. Cheers.